At this time, we've got a wonderful panel coming up, and we want to turn it over to the moderator, Renault Polo Catalani. Please enjoy.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm so happy to see your bright, beautiful, brave faces. Would you give me a thumbs up if my audio and video is okay? Okay, that's plenty. That's plenty. Please, I know many of you, and some of you I wish I didn't know quite so well, but most of you I have great respect and affection for. Let me introduce myself for folks who don't know me, and then of course for our participating audience. My name is Ronald Latang Sayang Catalani. I am our Manado mother and Catalan's father's second of 4 boys. I'm also our public health doctor daughters and our artist son's pop, and I'm our granddaughter's opa. Our family, I need you to know, has succeeded under 6 colonial and nascent nations governments. Alhamdulillah. I've studied and lawyered human migrations from the Middle East, from East Africa and Southeast Asia. I recently completed 1,000 print and broadcast media commentaries on our immigrant America's sorrows and our joys. It is my honor, it is my duty to begin us this afternoon with a prayer and a expression of great gratitude to the families, communities who have so cared for the Pacific Northwest corner of our continent that is 130 centuries of this kind of stewardship. Tentu kasihan ilah. Oh, clearly God loves us. Because clearly our shared continent so nourishes you and me and us every day. Surely too, no matter where your family lives, you've read about how 2 centuries ago, U.S. Army Corps of Discovery captains, Lewis and Clark, paddled up River Columbia and claimed this place, this blessed northwest corner of America where our family lives, as their own. But as everyone else standing around back then knew, this place's wealth and health was carefully stewarded for 130 centuries by indigenous families living here and loving here. Alhamdulillah. So the truth is, out here, out west, we will always have great love and we will always have great respect for our Chinook, Clackamas, Kalapuya, Katlamat, Mount Noma, and Tualatin peoples, and for our confederate tribes of Grand Ronde, Tentu Kasihan Ilah. Let me introduce you all so that I'm not saying nice or nasty things. I've been given a script. So Dr. S.K. Lowe, you've all heard her introduction earlier. I'll just repeat it in short. She is, of course, the founding president of Asian American Unity Coalition and served as the chair of the National Civic Leadership Forum since 2019. These are the national organizations bringing us this forum. Dr. Lowe, thank you for so caring for our families and for our communities. She's also a theoretical physicist with an MBA in strategic management. Scary. She's worked for Honeywell in classified defense research. See, I told you this was scary. And has held several patents, all for good things, I'm sure. Those successes, among many, many more, we file on her brainy side. On her business column, Dr. Lowe established 2 successful Kumon franchise outlets in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She's the founding president of the Kumon Franchisee Association in North America, which has won variable pricing for all their franchises. We're all beneficiaries today of Dr. Lowe's extraordinary range of skills, her experience, and her connectivity. Peggy Nagai is a 3rd-generation Japanese American who earned her AB from Vassar College in East Asian Studies, her JD from Lewis and Clark Law School, those fellows I just mentioned, and an MA from the University of Santa Monica in spiritual psychology. Peggy was, and will always be in our hearts, lead national attorney in the U.S. Supreme Court Coram Nobis case of Yasui versus United States of America. She was senior trial attorney for Urban Indian Council here in Portland, an indigent defense program, and a Howard University Reginald Heber Smith Fellow. I can say that, rolls right off my tongue because I was one of those fellows, no doubt because she plugged me in. She was assistant dean at University of Oregon Law School when Derek Bell, you may remember Professor Bell, was a civil rights professor for President Obama. And Derek Bell came and blessed us in Eugene, Oregon, and 4 or 5 years of abuse later. That's what we do to saints. She was assistant dean for Professor Bell, for Dean Bell. And because of her and our 90-year-old great-grandmother, and our mom, still is so happy you took care of her third boy, Peggy. Anila Afzali, and listen, this part gives me great joy. It makes my hands sweat because she is this next generation of leadership, of bright and brave daughters. I'm so proud and so humbled by you all. She is now the executive director of the American Muslim Empowerment Network at the Muslim Association of Puget Sound. We're trying to get her back down here to Portland, but she'll have no part of us. She also serves as governing board member of the Faith Action Network, advisory board member of Washington for Black Lives, steering committee member of the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network, and a part of the National Roundtable on Combating Islamophobia. Anila, of course she did, graduated summa cum laude with a bachelor's degree in psychology from University of Oregon, Robert D. Clark's Honor College, and was named a Chase International Service Fellow at Harvard Law School. She doesn't need us that much anymore. In addition to her practice, Anila co-founded MELAW, which is the Middle Eastern Legal Association of Washington, and served as inaugural president, for 2 years. Next, Dr. Debbie Almontasser is an internationally recognized, award-winning educator, speaker, and author. She's an authority on cross-cultural communication and understanding, and an influential community leader and founder and CEO of Bridging Cultures Group, Inc. She was founding and former principal of the Khalil Gibran International Academy in Brooklyn, New York, where my daughter and granddaughters live. Currently, she's board president of the Muslim Community Network. Dr. Almontasser received her BA from Francis College and Master of Science, from Adelphi University, and her doctorate in education from Fordham University. She wrote, in fact, she gave me Leading While Muslim, experience of American Muslim principles after 9/11 when we met in Portland, Oregon. Doctor, you should know I immediately lost that book in a move, got another one from Muslim Education Trust, lost that in another move, and I've got my third. One day all these books will return to me, inshallah. Professor Khatam Bazian is co-founder and professor of the Islamic Law and Theology at Zaytuna College in California. In addition, Professor Bazian is a lecturer in departments of Near Eastern and Asian American and Asian Diaspora Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. And there you have it, in that long title will be what's at issue for us as we discuss who and how and what Asians are, for heaven's sake. No, for our sake. He teaches courses in Islamic law and society, Islam in America, deconstructing Islamophobia, and othering of others. I've just learned that word, othering. I'm trying to practice. In spring 2009, Professor Bazian founded at Berkeley's the Islamophobia Research and Documentation Project at the Center for Race and Gender, a research unit dedicated to the systemic study of othering Islam and Muslims. Jenny Kim, another generation, of our fantastic daughters. True for her, and also true for the other young woman in our group, is these are very practical problem solvers who people look up to as sisters, as aunties, as daughters in our communities. And that mix, that wonderful mix that both Anila and Jenny have of being practical and theoretical and can actually explain that to knuckleheads like me is priceless. Jenny has a BS in microbiology and molecular genetics from UCLA. I have no idea what that means. It just says so. She's an organizations graduate consultant working with multinational corporations. She's the founder of Korean American Coalition, Oregon chapter, and was their first president. Korean American Coalition of Oregon fosters strong Korean American community by promoting Korean American engagement in the civic, legislative, and community lives through advocacy and community service. Jenny also serves as a council member of Korea National Unification Advisory Council. She is vice president of the Korean Society of Oregon, old school fellas like me, and a vice chair of the board of directors of the Korean War Memorial Foundation of Oregon, a charitable organization working to commemorate and educate our public about our Korean War. Jenny is also an organizing member of the Adoptee Rights Campaign, ARC. So there you have it. Now that's the easy part. Let us get to the more complex part. Excuse me while I bully my mouse around a little bit. Panelists, and I'm going to ask you to respond in 3 minutes. No mass or something awful will happen to all of us. Ask you to respond in 3 minutes to this question, please. And Peggy, we'll start with you, then to Anila, Professor Khatem. Oh, I forgot to introduce Wajdi Said. Sorry, momentito. Wajdi Said, as we're scrambling to put together his place on your panel, I've not received in a format that I can download and open his bio. But believe me, it's as thick as, I don't know, as the Quran. Wajdi Said, I believe, came as a student to Portland State University in Oregon in the late 1970s. Nod your head if that's correct, Tuan Wajdi. And he came as a pre-medical student, no, and however got into chemistry and into a wonderful marriage with his wife instead. So he didn't go to doctor school, but has been doctoring us ever since. Wajdi is known locally in a number of ways, but an example of that ways is that from August 2001 until today, he and Catholic and Jewish church elders established Portland's Interfaith Council. Now, this council has fun arms where we meet for lunch every week, and we're not allowed to fight with each other. We're only allowed to eat and have fun. Also, practical arms that do the work with the legislature and negotiate with our city council and the county commission on how on earth we're going to live together. Our city is 70 ethnic and national groups, sort of like my home country, which is 700, but we don't have sticks and guns back home. So this group has been meeting, mind you, from a month before 9/11, 2001 to present. So it was really a God, alhamdulillah, that this was already people agreeing to meet each other after the tragic attack on our country, on our new homeland. Likewise, for the beloved community organization, he runs and several other legislative things. And there's, of course, the Muslim Educational Trust and the Islamic school at the Educational Trust. Wajdi is the fix-it guy, and it's simply impossible to resist him. It doesn't matter if you're a United States Senate or a state governor or state attorney general or county district attorney or any judge in any jurisdiction. They have to come if Wajdi asks them. They actually answer his phone calls. Very old school. Okay, so back to my questions. Peggy, please. From your perspective, your personal and your professional experience, how do you feel Asian Americans can best unite and heal all of our differences in the past?
Well, that's a tall order to answer in 3 minutes. And Polo, would you keep time for me? So I'm really pleased to be here, happy to be on this panel with all these esteemed guests. And what I would say is that we need to understand our similarities and our differences. And that's a key paradox in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we have similarities and we have differences. We need to honor both of those and work with both of those. So some of the similarities are that we are awash in this perpetual foreignness. We're either the model minority or we're the perpetual foreigner or we're the yellow peril. And we are all covered under that umbrella. They didn't call the H1N1 virus the North Carolina white hog farmers virus, but they definitely said it was a China virus and they definitely said it was Kung flu. So that's one of the things. The other thing is who has the right, who gets to be an American, as Scott Nakagawa asks us. And as the perpetual foreigner, we oftentimes are seen not as an American, but as a would-be American or could be American or not really an American. We also have a collective demand for safety, for belonging, for equality, and we face common issues and challenges of racism and marginalization, systemic difficulties, and the fact that we have little data, and the fact that we are oftentimes our political perspective and value is hinged upon our homeland or our country of ancestry and their relationship, geopolitical relationship with the US. So I think those are all our similarities. I think we've got a common enemy, which is racism and white supremacy, and we have our differences. So even among us, there's huge differences. And what's happened in bringing us all together without disaggregation of data is that we're sort of one broad sweep. So we've got differences in poverty, in health disparities, just COVID-19. They said that Asian Americans have the highest vaccination rate of any racial group, but they don't disaggregate the data because Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders have the highest morbidity rate under COVID-19. And in Oregon and probably across the country, that's what we need. That's where we need to say to people, we have differences. So education, labor and employment, housing, access to government programs and services. We have differences based on, I think, East Asian, South Asian, Southeast Asian, all of those differences. And because data is not disaggregated, then people get to use this as a wedge, oftentimes a wedge between the dominant white culture and African Americans, frankly. So that has inflamed this anti-Blackness in Asian American communities that we really need to deal with. So how do we deal with that? How am I doing for time, Polo?
Your time is up, dear.
Okay. So I'm going to go over a little bit, but the healing that needs to happen, the healing among us, the truth and reconciliation, the trust building, the acknowledgement of our historical differences vis-a Asian countries. That I think has to be shared and brought out. I mean, the Japanese, the Korean comfort women, and the Japanese soldiers, those are issues that stay with us unless we deal with them. So coming together and convening, and then public education and media to heal the distorted aspects of who we are through public education and through media, and multicultural Asian coalitions. Okay, I'll stop there. I've got much more, but I've
Thank
gone
you.
over my
And
limit.
folks, you're fine. Thank you. And folks, you need to know it took Peggy and I 30 years to become best buds because precisely of that. Our parents suffered as slave labor under Imperial Japan, which of course has very little to do with Japanese America. But I could not get that out of my bones. All right. Thank you so much, Peggy. Anila, same question, please. Do you remember it?
Mostly,
Thank you.
yes. But I think, first off, I'll just say hello, and it's an honor to be here with everyone. I think Peggy did a great job outlining the issue specifically. So I'll just add that, first off, I'm Afghan American. So right now, this is an extremely difficult time. And while I am an attorney, I left my legal career in 2013 after I had a spiritual transformation that inspired me to focus my time, efforts, and energy on community service, advocacy, activism, and more in the pursuit of building exactly these kinds of bridges of understanding and unity, these coalitions that I'm so heavily involved in. And I think one of the things we need to do in talking about the healing that needs to happen or the unification that needs to happen is to start by recognizing how broad this category of Asian is. Often people have a certain view of who Asians look like, but Asia, as we all know, includes so much more than just our East Asian or Southeast Asian. We have Central Asians like myself from Afghanistan, we have South Asians, and so much more. And as Peggy said, we want to sort of understand and share our similarities, but also celebrate our differences, the places where we could bring richness to the wider community through our very differences. And I would also want to comment that just beyond inter-Asian unity, the work that I do, and I've said this many times before, is we really need to build coalitions that are multi-ethnic, multi-racial, multi-faith, multi-religious, multi-generational, multilingual. That's what we really need to build. So it goes well beyond just the inter-Asian unity, because it really is up to us. And I mean us as in you and me, we the people who have to be the ones saving us, because we can't rely on the president or Congress or sort of the courts or any institution to save us. It really is up to us. And we have the many different instances of negativity, the hate, the attacks, the stereotypes. Peggy, of course, touched on many of those. Those are things that each of our communities have separately and collectively experienced. But what I do is I say, let's use those instances to actually strengthen our bonds together. But to do that well, we have to actually have relationships, establish relationships before these incidents happen. And that's the whole mission of the work that I do at MAPS Amen, is to build coalitions so we're always in collaboration, advocating for justice together for all of us and combating hate and bigotry and all the various forms of isms. And there have been many direct examples. Last week we had an attack on one of our Sikh Gurdwaras, and to have the Muslim community show support for that, as they have, as our Sikh brothers and sisters have shown support to our community many times as well. Of course, with the anti-Asian hate crimes, being able to show support and solidarity and stand with our Asian sisters and brothers in calling out and condemning those kinds of rhetoric that led to that kind of hate being sort of manifested in really ugly and brutal ways. We also had the experience here in Washington State of an anti-Muslim Hindutva or Hindu supremacist group promoting anti-Muslim messages. And we built this strong and powerful coalition of people from the very wide Asian community and beyond in standing united to combat that and drive out that kind of group, because that kind of hate has no place here. So we really need to unite on those values that we all share. And while at the same time promoting the positive stories, because we can't just be hung up on the negativity, we have to share the many beautiful, powerful, resilient, inspiring stories that our community has. And we have to address the racism and colorism that does unfortunately exist even within our own communities, and which have been used, as Peggy mentioned, as wedge issues, as ways to divide and conquer and keep us separated and apart and really politically less empowered as a result. So the better we are at recognizing how interconnected our various struggles are, and recognizing that an attack on one really is an attack on all, and recognizing that these kinds of forms of hate are like a fire in a house. If one room is burning, it can affect other rooms as well. It's not going to stay in that one room alone. That's what we need to do. And that's why I often say that Islamophobia or anti-Muslim sentiment does not just hurt me as a Muslim. It hurts every single one of us as Americans. Just like all lives cannot matter until Black lives matter. And if Black lives mattered, then Muslim lives would also matter, Asian lives would also matter, immigrant lives would also matter. And the sooner we can understand and implement that idea, that philosophy, and build that beloved community that Dr. King and others popularized, that's when we can be better off, and actually all of us come out stronger ahead. Because when we uplift from the margins, we do make this a ship that we all sort of rise on. And that's what I'm working on. That's what I want to see more of, and to be able to create the kind of systemic change that we have to do that further continues the kind of oppressive systems that continue to hurt all of our communities separately. We can address it, but only if we have that strength in numbers and solidarity for each other.
Thank you, Sister Anila. You are so compelling. I'm inclined to just let you talk for the next hour. But I know I will be in serious problems with some of the other folks on the panel. So same question, please, Debbie, Dr. Almontasar, from your experience and from your profession, how do you feel Asian Americans can best unite and heal our differences, our past differences?
Thank you, my dear brother. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Peace and greetings. I'm really delighted to be a part of this. So thank you for inviting me. I was just so inspired to listen to my dear sisters speak earlier, and just say that I want to start by acknowledging how important and critical it is to have actually Asian American leaders really leading this conversation and being at the center of the conversation and the movement. And I was really happy to see, one of my Congresswomen, Congresswoman Grace Meng, who actually was a part of today's program. So critical. The work that I do and I believe in is that we have to center the directly impacted communities and give them the opportunity to show us what they need and how they want to lead, and how we can be allies and supporters. This is the premise that I believe in and I operate. This was no different for me when my community was under attack by the Muslim ban during the Trump administration. As a directly impacted individual, Yemen was one of the countries that was targeted by the Muslim ban. And certainly what I wanted my allies and my colleagues within the American Muslim community, the Arab American community, to really give that space to Yemeni Americans, Iranian Americans, and so on and so forth, who have been directly impacted, to really understand what our needs are and the way that we need them to be allies and supporters in this work. I think one of the things that I have, kept a close eye on since the rise in anti-Asian hate that has just been really absolutely disturbing and horrifying. We've had so many incidents in New York City. It's been heartbreaking. We have one of the largest Asian American communities in the country. I have friends, I have neighbors, and just to see what they were experiencing was just absolutely heartbreaking. And so I think, what we need to do is to really provide that opportunity for our Asian Americans to, help us understand what they need. And One way that we did that in New York City, one of my colleagues who actually went to university with me when we were becoming principals contacted me. She's Chinese American. My dear friend Karen said, I need your help. We're going to do a visual, and it's going to be the Chinese American community. And I want you to bring faith leaders and any other leaders who can be there as allies. My job was to do that, and her job was going to be to outreach to her community. And when I, done the outreach in the interfaith community, everybody was asking me, well, where's the flyer? Is this going to be on social media? We want to announce this. And I said to them, folks, I am just supporting my friend Karen to do this. I'm going to be there, and I want you to be there. I'm not going to bother her about, a flyer. I'm not going to bother her about, if it's going to be on social media. I went back, I asked her, do you have a flyer? She said to me, no, but it's going to be at this time. Do you have a Facebook event? She said, no, but we'll get the flyer and you can share the flyer. Long story short, what my dear friend Karen did was provide a space for her community. And when I said to her, how many people are you expecting? She said, we're going to get the capacity that we can for our Zoom account, which is 500. We had 1,000 Chinese Americans that were on that event. Every time I think about it, I get so emotional. I was so proud at that moment just to be an ally, right? Not to be in the forefront, not to be the one driving it. And for my interfaith friends who were too busy about putting this out on social media, I kept telling them, this is not about you and it's not about me. It's about this community. And our job is to show up and give them the space and allow them to speak and allow them to tell us what they want us to do. And it was just one of the most amazing, amazing experiences that I have had in a very long time to offer that space. And all of my interfaith colleagues, the next day and that night just text me or emailed me and just thanked me and apologized for driving me crazy. But thank me because they've never seen such an incredible showing of people who came and who listened to prayers in different languages. But most importantly, we gave an opportunity for people to speak about how they were feeling, to give reflection, whether it was in English or in Chinese. And the event was supposed to be an hour and a half. It was 4 hours long. And many of my interfaith partners stayed on, and so did I, because I was just so touched by the stories and the reflections that your average neighbor was giving about their experiences. And I think we need to do more of that, right? We need to do more of that. And lastly, I wanna point out to the unity that we're all talking about, and my dear sister has also talked about this, is that we have allowed the system to to categorize this community as the Asian Pacific Islander community. What does that mean? How does that describe the vast, beautiful diversity that exists within that part of the world, whether we look at the culture, whether we look at the customs, the traditions, the religion? I feel that specific category whitewashes the beautiful mosaic of diversity that exists within these communities that does a huge disservice. Like when I try to explain to people what that term means, people are like, oh, I didn't know that, Malaysians were a part of this. Oh, I didn't know that Indonesians were a part of this. Oh, I didn't know that Sri Lankans, were a part of this. It's time that we, take this term and really, debunk it and break it down, so that way we don't lose the authenticity and the beautiful, the beautiful mosaic of each and every one of these countries and what they offer to the world. This is the only way that we're going to educate people. We cannot generalize about a community. We can't, when just speaking from being a member of the Arab diaspora, right? People will say, I'm Egyptian, I'm Jordanian, I'm Lebanese, I'm, everything but Yemeni. And then when I say to them that I'm from Yemen, they're shocked. Why? Why are you shocked? And this is why it's so important, even within the Arab diaspora, that we educate one another about the beautiful mosaic of the different Arab nations that exist and how they are different from one place to another. So, what I would like to see us helping our Asian American community do is to unite on celebrating this vast, beautiful diversity that makes this community so special, that is just beyond, the Asian Pacific Islander category, but is really highlighting and celebrating each and every country that is under that umbrella. So I'll stop there. I'm sorry that I took a little longer.
Thank you. Thank you, Sister Debbie. And let me just remind folks this way. Yes, we are all crybabies, but another problem we're having in our communities and in our family is when our mother found out that I was signing up as a minority student at University of Oregon, she wept. And then she said how ashamed our grandpa would be if we think of ourselves as minuscule, as minimalized something, minimalized Americans, because we come from a 4,000-year-old culture, continuous culture. How to work with that shame, shared unhappily in mainstream, is a very difficult issue, and I don't want to break another mother's heart. Swami Wajdi, Teacher Wajdi, from your professional personal experience, how are we going to heal ourselves and unify? Oh dear, audio's missing.
Are today, is to understand, the process of thinking, and how we are raised, and how we lived our history, our foremothers and forefathers. It has been a wonderful history for us, for me as a Yemeni American, or American Yemeni, or American Muslim, or Arab American, and the history of beauty that our forefathers and foremothers defined, the Silk Road, through the land trade or the ocean trade. Today when people speak about the Silk Road, they think only about China. They don't know that the contribution of Central Asia, Muslim societies, whether Bangladesh or western part of China, Muslim western part of China, and India, and Afghanistan, and Pakistan, and Iran, and Kyrgyzstan, and all this, Iraq and Syria and Yemen, that we embraced each other, beyond the artificial boundaries that were created, through colonial, domination of 300 or 200 years or 400. But these boundaries were not there. We traveled, from Yemen carrying goods, of frankincense, and coffee, and raisins and almonds, and we went, to Mecca and Medina, and we carried dates, and went to Palestine. We carried olive oil and many other goods to Syria, to Iraq, and Iran, and the beautiful carpets, of Afghanistan and Iran, and Uzbekistan, and then to China, and we brought many goods. And this is human relationship, not only the trade aspect, the business aspect, but also, the music, the geographical stories, and many other stories. Many Chinese today, they don't understand the history of Muslim China, they don't know that there was a captain, in the Han Dynasty. His name was Jing He. He was a great admiral, that traveled with 11 boats, of goods, from China all the way to Mecca, and what we call today, you know, uh, Sudan and Somalia and Ethiopia and Yemen. And this history needs to repeat itself. And we cannot move forward unless we heal yesterday and understand yesterday, so we can embrace today and love tomorrow. The define of Silk Road need to re-examine today in our context as American of Asian background. Today, we are more embracing of Asia, West Asia, than yesterday. Maybe Dr. Hatem can explain that more as a professor of Asian studies. But for me, as a chemical engineer, as a chemist, I believe in as a catalyst. The change is in our hand, and how to embrace the healing and the unifying agenda is by acknowledging the challenges and the opportunities. There were more opportunities yesterday than today, but we can reclaim that opportunities so we can heal ourselves. In our Muslim Educational Trust here today, for me as an Arab American, as an American Muslim, I grew up where my mother taught me, may God rest her soul in peace, that Wajdi, don't appoint one finger towards Jenny Kim or Paulo Catalani. Just embrace the three fingers that pointing towards you, which means I have to look from within. How can I heal and unify rather than blaming somebody else. It is easy today to blame somebody else. Yesterday I got a text, somebody blaming me rather than he takes the responsibility and try to be a man of dignity and honor. But it is very important for us that it's easy to blame somebody, and for us in our traditions, in our values, the Quran always states that God doesn't change the status quo of people unless they change themselves. How can I change myself to become a good human being? And how can I embrace my beloved sister Sakwan Lo as a Chinese American, my brother Sandy Cho, or Anthony Ng, or Jenny Kim as a Korean, or my brother Sho Dozono as a Japanese American. Today, our story is a one story, that's the human story. And it is very important that we stand, for the good and the challenge, and try to challenge, these weaknesses in our societies of bigotry and hate, and turn them into strength of love, unconditional love to one another, and how we can also turn these challenges, into opportunities. And patience and patience and patience is the only key. Today, I talked to my brother, beloved brother Hatem Bazian, before our Friday sermon. I was, whining and complaining. He told me, Wajdi, embrace what's in your hand today. Jump, and can be a healer and unifier in this panel, and embrace the vacuum and feel it. And I'm here today to embrace that vacuum and feel it. And we can do it. We have done it for 700 years in the Silk Road trade, and we still can do it today, in another 700 years, in embracing one another by acknowledging the challenges and embrace the opportunities.
Thank you, Tuan Wajdi. Brother Hatem, last time I saw you, I said to myself, and I made a note actually, to ask you, where on earth do you get those great jackets? And here you are again, making me look last century. Please, can we get your response to this?
We have to accept that we are in one of the most difficult challenges in the history of the world, maybe in the past 500 years plus, from the time that Columbus got lost in trying to get to India, and the indigenous people discovered that he was lost. In essence, what is being put in front of us is that we are within America's racial box, and America still continues to refuse to recognize that the racial box is a failure. And even as the current landscape in America defines America with the clash of civilization discourse that America is a white Anglo-Saxon Christian settler society. And that's where you see some of the debates and discussions of the replacement theory and so on. So what is presented to us as not only Asian Americans, but also communities of color that are of the global South that are inhabiting the global North is how to define America as a society based on the foundation of equality of all, equality of opportunity, equality of access, and equality of the dignity of individual with their complexities, differences, challenges. We only speak of that we are different when we're speaking with the global South. But last I checked, both World War I, World War II was the most disastrous human exercises that came out of Europe. Yet we are always projected that we can't get along. And the question for me is that really we have to reframe the conversation about defining America of the future. And this is what is being presented to us, and to account for these differences and challenges that are ahead of us. I would speak possibly from our own experience of Asian American and Asian diaspora studies at UC Berkeley. Both of my courses on One Islam in America and Deconstructing Islamophobia, their genesis came as a result of our Asian American Studies faculty. Professor late Ron Takaki, who really have done some of the early work. He actually was the first in UC Berkeley to teach Black Studies out on Sproul Plaza because there was nobody to teach Black Studies. And Evelyn Nagano Glenn, also Japanese American, Elaine Kim, Korean American, Ling Chi Wong, Chinese American. So when we proposed the course on Islam in America and so on, it said it naturally should be part of Asian American studies. The largest Muslim population is in Asia. The challenges that are faced are within the Asian context. And then as we built into the work around Islamophobia, which really focused on Obama at the time when we started the center, that Obama really, those who opposed Obama and used his closet Muslimness really wanted to use the N-word on Obama. But they felt comfortable in using the M-word as the signpost for the N-word. And then that opened the whole Pandora box for people to feel that they're empowered of taking America back again by actually coming out publicly with their racism. So there's actually a direct line from the attack on Obama to people marching in Charleston with their torches, and now we get the attacks on Asian Americans. Once you allow the lid on racism to open up against any group, it begins permissible. The oxygen has been given to this cluster of individuals that we thought in the 1960s we put them back or put them out of civil society. I'm sorry to say that they have claimed civil society. The fact that you actually people can speak out publicly on the airwaves in defending a replacement theory, in problematizing the immigrants, in actually thinking that taking Haitians out of the borders and trying to get them to Guantanamo shows that we have lost the civil society. And what I'm thinking in how we heal and unify ourselves, we need to unify around an agenda that claims the society and claims the narrative. And I would say we have many examples in the history of Asia per se that could be brought to forth in order for us to push forth for a different America that is far more inclusive, far more empathetic, and far more attentive to really bringing forth a different type of society that we're in. America is an experiment, but I think this experiment right now is in the intensive care unit on many different fronts. And I think what we need is to rescue it from that circumstances.
Heads up, Professor. Jenny Kim, from your personal and familial, your communal In your professional experience, how would you reply to the question? How are we going to heal ourselves, and how are we going to unify this greater sense of self?
I agree with Peggy that that's really a very tough question and a big question. How do we heal ourselves? I think it's, as Peggy and others have so eloquently and passionately mentioned, we need to understand who we are, look internally in ourselves, understand that we have differences in languages, religion, and culture and personal histories, but we have a lot of commonalities as well. And I want to pivot a little bit to, maybe focusing a little bit on our next generation and children. I think that's how we heal and that's how we unify. Um, the fact that we're all here is because we're working not only for ourselves, but for the next generation. We're working here for our children and our grandchildren so that they may have a better opportunity, better access to jobs, experiences, and so they don't feel that they're minorities in this country, right? Unfortunately, in the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years, it feels like a lot of the work that we've done in civil rights have gone backwards. So we've lost a lot of the progress that we've made. But at the same time, I think this is an opportunity for us to talk about our history and challenges and admit that we ourselves in our own communities have biases and racism, right? We have to acknowledge that and make sure that we don't teach that to our children. Polo, you mentioned earlier about how it took you a long time getting over, past, I guess, fear and hatred towards, what has happened in World War II with Japanese imperialism. And weirdly enough, I've learned that from my parents and my grandparents, and I always remind them that they can't carry that and they can't continue to dwell on that. And I try very hard to not pass on my biases to my children. So I want to encourage you, the panelists and all the participants, to include your children, your neighbors' kids, your nieces and nephews in these conversations, because we assume that they would know better, but they don't. We have to give them an opportunity to ask questions, maybe uncomfortable questions that might actually allow us to reflect on ourselves. But we need to understand that kids don't have biases. They're not born with them. We allow that to happen. And so when we encourage our children to see others as people, go beyond the color of our skin, our religion, food, any differences we have, and to learn about each other, I think that's how we build unity. And that's a way for me to heal myself when I see my kids having, a very diverse group of friends who may not have same experiences as they do, but they're willing to learn about theirs and their religion and the food that they eat.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sister Jenny, daughter Jenny. I can't remember. That's an awful lot, Dr. Lowe. That's an awful lot. It's already been said. And I took furious notes while people were saying these things in some wish that I put this all together and put it to you, since you are our elder stateswoman here. From your experience, then, Dr. Lowe, how are we going to proceed in healing ourselves and finding some way to unify this grand universe of what U.S. demographics, maybe no one else, but U.S. demographics is calling Asian America? From your perspective, how are we going to move forward?
I guess unlike the other panelists, I really don't have a long history of civil rights movements or activities. I just got called from my experience. I had a very happy childhood and life experience in general. I don't have any gripe against anyone. And that's my hope, that everyone should have the same. And that's what I want to emphasize, that we should build our collective American dream together.
We are all immigrants to this country at different periods of time for different reasons, bringing different burdens with us. This is our adopted country now. We have to learn not to carry our past and present animosity to this new land that we call home. The level of trust has to build to be healing our differences. How can we unite in solidarity? We are trained from a very young age to discriminate and categorize objects and experiences. That's a scientific way of dealing with things. But building unity requires us to ignore some of those differences and work towards a common goal. So the process of building unity has to be a fair one or equitable one to all, so that everyone feels that they have a stake in this whole process, so that we all have a fair chance of succeeding on a level playing field. We can work towards a common goal given the conditions that we are all at the same level, seeing eye to eye, and giving each other the respect we all deserve, knowing that each of us will contribute differently, but to the best of our ability. So that's what I'm hoping to achieve, be able to move past what we had and go forward.
Oh, this is so beautiful, this proposition about us being driven by the joy of childhood instead of the sorrow of our homelands, the factors that drove us here, and instead of the shame of what we had to live with when we left our households to go to school, to go to workplace, and so on. I'm moved, Dr. Lowe, by the simplicity and the sincerity of that idea. Let us remember our joy and be so grateful for that, for this, for us together in this joyful way. Let me see, I think that's yes, that well, there are no more. We have a second question. And this has to do, panelists, and why don't we go the reverse order this time? The question is, what do you feel is our biggest challenge today? And then looking down the road, say 10 years from now, I mean, who can say, who would have known 10 years ago we would be here today? Who could have known 20 years ago that we would have this astounding murder, you know, in Pennsylvania, in New York, in Virginia, Pentagon. But can you project, you know, what is our biggest challenge today as Asian Americans, and 10 years down the road, how do you see us? And okay, let's go in reverse order then. If we could, please. Dr. Lowe, can you answer? Can you respond first? And I'm sorry, folks, you have 2 minutes. And when I hold up this upside down timer, that means your time is up.
I only have a short answer
Yes,
to this. So I think the biggest challenge facing Asian American today is being in the middle of the conflict between the US and the rise of Asia. This is going to continue for the next 10 years. So how can we assimilate in this country without losing our cultural heritage? What role can we play to bridge the gap that is widening between US and Asia? How do we address the blatant attacks and bias from the rest of society, as in the rise of anti-Asian hate? How do we take care of our community? How do we develop an Asian American identity? I just have more questions than answers looking into the future. That's my answer to your
thank you,
question.
Dr. Lowe. Beautiful. Again, you embarrass me with your sincerity, your simplicity, and your graciousness. Thank you. Who is second to last? Jenny. Jenny, please. What do you think?
It's hard to just pick one specific thing that I think is the biggest issue that's facing our community. But for me, I would say it's the fact that we have racism within our own AAPI community against one another. I think to me, that's a big challenge in unifying us as a group. It's hard to have one voice when we don't understand each other and we're not willing to even listen to one another. So for me, I think, the idea of educating our own communities, understanding each other, knowing that we do have differences, but we have commonalities, I think that's incredibly important. It is definitely easier said than done, right? As we talked about, we have many different countries, different languages, different cultures, and it's going to take a lot of work and genuine, methodical, intentional steps to teach our communities so that we can actually get past that. I'm hoping 10 years from now, people have better understanding that model minority concept is a myth, because some of our own community members actually believe in that themselves, and that that's not true, that we have many community members who are struggling, who need support and who need understanding, and they need voice, and more people would step up and represent our communities. And not everybody is pushing their children to be doctors and lawyers, and they could be politicians and people who can be faces that youth see on TV. They could be cultural phenomenons, right? And I'm hoping that we have more of that.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Please, Professor.
I both echo Dr. Law and Kim in terms of their analysis. I do think that the critical challenge for us moving forward in terms, if the United States chooses again another cycle of military interventions and military confrontation, where Asia is the theater of such an intervention, be it in China or other region, which would place the various segments of the Asian American community at the crossroads in a highly, highly fragmented and highly racialized tone to public discourse in the present. We are already in a very, very slippery slope where those who have fanned the flame of racism, of the yellow pearl, of the rising power of China, of all this attempt of undermining Western civilization, they have consumed all the oxygen in the society. And if it tips toward any type of military confrontation, that the various Asian American communities will be at the receiving end of even higher level of racism, discrimination. And I think what we need is to prepare ourselves for this type of backlash that will occur. And our both legal institutions, civil society institutions, our self-defense institutions have to be prepared more in the central part of the country than possibly in the coastal areas. So I'm not worried, even though we'll get cases in New York, San Francisco, LA, but these will not be where the heavy onslaught will take place. And I think what we need is to strategize before the crisis, plan for the worst, and hope for the best at this particular time as we are looking for the next few years, especially as we are thinking that our economic underpinning is weak domestically in the United States. The only thing that we have right now is that we have more bombs at our disposal. So it becomes the only choice to leverage it in the face of losing economic standing. So that for me is the major concern.
Thank you, Khatem. Thank you, Professor. The other teacher then, Teacher Wajdi. our challenges, speaking collectively as Asian Americans, are present and in 10 years down this road?
Concern, or our biggest concern, is really the challenge for us, is the acceptance of one another. The acceptance of one another has been the challenge. It has been, the reason for many conflicts, the reason for many, disputes and many chaos. The challenge for humanity today in the 21st century as well, is adapting and sizing ourselves to fit within the capacity, of our means. Today we've faced challenges in many areas, and especially in food and water. Today, we, some have the many resources and spending these resources, unfortunately, in weapons of mass destruction. It creates poverty. It creates many economic disparities. It creates many relationship to be destroyed, boundaries being defined and redefined, and how we can really, as humans, decrease this conflict, and this conflict, that produces many diseases. Today, just look at the pandemic today, the COVID-19 virus, the vaccine. Nations that are rich, dominating, the control of this vaccine. People that are suffering in Africa, in Asia, in many other places, that diseases spread. So there are many, but I will narrow it, to acceptance. When I accept my beloved sister, Jenny Kim, or SK, Dr. Sakwan Lo, or Debbie, or, Anila, and many other individuals, I will be able to mobilize the resources, to heal and unify. Today, we need a voice of balance, a social justice, oriented voice. We cannot move forward, without really understanding and accepting one another. And this is the only way for us to move forward in a healing and unifying the agenda of healing, that we are concerned today, irrespective of our gender, irrespective of our religiosity, or whatever, man-made. And I say man because we men created many chaos through. I grew up with 9 sisters. They were healers in the family. They were unifiers, in the family. And I think it's very important for us to understand that, the power of acceptance that will heal every single individual that we care for and humanity at large. So the challenge of acceptance is my main concern today.
Challenge of acceptance. Thank you, Wajdi. Acceptance of ourselves and people right next to us. Dr. Debbie Almontasar, same question. How do you see our biggest problem?
Oh, sorry. I started talking without my mic. It's only been 1.5 years, right? I said I will be really quick by starting with the present. The present requires us, and I say us, all the allies and all the supporters, to step aside and give the platform to Asian Americans of every ethnic background to basically have the center and lead us in what needs to happen in this. We can all sit here and provide commentary and forecasts, but really the best people that know what needs to be done and how it needs to be done are really this very community itself. Needs to be the navigator, needs to be the pilot. And then in the future, with given that opportunity to lead, and basically tell us what we need to do as allies, I think that we will be in a much better place, giving them the opportunity to be in that leadership position for self-determination, inshallah.
Oh, beautiful, inshallah. Sister Neela, same question. What's our biggest woe? Forget 10 years from now. This is plenty of work for the present. And don't forget, okay.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with what others have already said. But if I had to pick sort of one specific item, I would really pick the division that exists within our communities as the biggest challenge. Because we are lumped together in this category of Asian or Asian American, but collectively, we don't actually know each other very well. We don't have enough of those relationships built up. We don't have enough of the sense of collaboration or enough knowledge and education about different cultures, religions, history, the misinformation, the stereotypes, the narratives that are promoted and propagated about any of our individual groups that sort of oftentimes pit us against each other. We need sort of more education around all of that and the real personal relationships that can help us overcome that. And the reason I choose this division as the biggest challenge is that this lack of solidarity also leads to lack of collective power, because we're actually very powerful. I don't want anybody to think we're not. We have so much power, potential, and possibility, but it's really tapping into that. And if we can if we can overcome the divisions, we can build the kind of collective power that we need to address all of the other issues that others have definitely identified already. Part of doing that, again, I'm going to repeat this, it involves us addressing some of the anti-Black racism that may exist, the Islamophobia that may exist in the Asian American community, the anti-Asian sentiments even within our own communities that may exist, and also recognizing that once we are able to bring ourselves together collectively, we can address some of the things that keep our communities back, like the lack of resources, including for some basic needs, like the community building that has to happen, the lack of political power, even though we're seeing some wonderful firsts and many people reaching those positions. So it's beautiful and inspiring to see, but we don't have enough advocacy on the issues that directly impact our communities. And 20 years from now, my hope, my vision is really in the youth of today. It's seeing how they're changing, how their attitudes, their mindsets, their collaboration, how it's very different. They are able to see some of what I am talking about and implement it in a way that's very different. We're seeing some of the work that many of us are involved in, where we are building exactly the kinds of coalitions that we need that do cross culture, race, religion, ethnicity, or more, and really get involved in organizing and mobilizing, recognizing our united collective struggle for liberation. That's what I ultimately view as sort of some positive hope to hold on to for the future, is to recognize that these systems that seek to oppress us all, we have power over that when we come together and struggle collectively for our collective liberation.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sister Neela. I don't have to tell you, you make my heart pound and my blood pressure go up. So this is terrific. I mean, in terms of pulling us out of our exhaustion, out of our collective anger and our collective exhaustion. Thank you so much. So at the other end of that bookend, Peggy Nagai, your thoughts, please.
I agree with what everything everybody said, and I'm going to take a different tact, which is when I look at history from the Chinese immigrants to today, that the biggest challenge is who gets to be an American, and the white-centeredness of that definition, and that the U.S. is seen as a white country, that Americans are seen as white people, and that whiteness is at the center of it, and that that's the norm. And any other color is a deviation from that norm. That James Baldwin said that white people need to love each other more, because if they would love each other more, they wouldn't have to create a Black problem in order for them to unify around it. And what I would say is race is a political construct. And until we can deconstruct the whiteness of this country, until we can redefine what democracy is, we will be back here in 10 years and in 20 years, because it is the same thing in a different format.
Yes. Well, beautifully said. And panelists are waiting for questions from our audience. Let me ask you this. I started with talking about our mother and how she wept when I was applying for University of Oregon. And she wept, I forgot to tell you, because I had to check the box that we are culturally deprived. I remember those words, that we are culturally deprived. There were also other kind of descriptors of what American minorities are, you know, marginalized, disempowered. You've heard them all, underprivileged. That's what made her weep. You know, how can you feel such a thing about yourself? And I want to say, I didn't listen to our mom for the next 50 years, right? From 18 until just the other day. And one of the things that occurs to me, and here's my question to you: our mother brought home from her job at the cafeteria at Judson Junior High. You know, they wear the little pastel zip-up suits and the nurse's shoes. Hot, harried work all day. But she brought home this little saying. She said to us, "I've had it up to here. I've had it up to here." And she'd snap her hand right up to her eyebrow. And then we knew trouble was about to happen. I think our pretty little planet has had it up to here. And this is what I want to ask you about. Us human beings are just an interdependent part of this grand production, this intricately balanced, you know, perfectly zero-sum biosphere. As we watch Afghanistan collapse, you know, as we've watched Afghanistan take a pounding from us for 20 years, 10 years under Taliban, and then 10 years under Soviet. And you see what Tuan Wajdi has described as the storied Silk Road. This place, this carrier of traders, of innovators, of holy men, of armies, of engineers, and the rest. I think our forests and our reefs have had it up to here. I imagine it's not just our mom. I imagine it's marble murrelet moms, it's Pacific Northwest sea otter moms. I imagine it's polar bear moms are telling us, you know, kids, I've had it up to here. So within this context, I think there's a time for a different kind of leadership. And I think this is where Peggy and many of the rest of you, it's just I remember her speaking last time, a short memory. I think this is where you all are leading. It's time for a new democracy. It's time for a new America. As new Americans, what is your take on this? On the collapse, the disintegration of our planet due to the extracting industries of our most successful human societies. We are extractive. We just extract people for slaves. We just extract people after we've messed up their country. In my time as a lawyer, we've been through 12 waves of extracted people whose lands we've made unlivable for them. This cannot be a coincidence, and this cannot be a segregation of a natural world and a human world. We are actually engineering the same disaster. Your views, please, and whoever gets most agitated and waves their arms can go first, because I don't know how to pick from you all. Professor, your
I
arms are
wanted to
waving.
pick on what I want to pick on what Peggy said last, which is very, very important. And I quote page 20 of Huntington Clash of Civilization, which is more appropriately Clash of Ignorance, but nevertheless, it's still with us. On page 20, he says, unless we hate what we are not, we can't love ourselves, or we can't love who we are. So basically, he's saying that the clash of civilization is that we have to find an object of our hate in order to arrive at a self-love for what he termed to be Western civilization. And for those who read the material, he posited that the major challenge to Western civilization is constituted around what he termed the Sino-Islamic alliance, meaning the Chinese and the Muslim world. Again, it's a discredited theory, but that's the theory that has been wired into politics, into people thinking strategy, and so on, for at least since the end of the Cold War in 1993. I argue that in doing so, he put Judeo-Christian tradition on its head, because the basis of Judeo-Christian, at least, or the Christian theological tradition, is that it's the theology of love thy enemy. So not only that Huntington has it wrong politically, but also has it wrong theologically. But you see people actually picking his book and continuously to push for a clash of civilization, which is wired into the displacement theory, wired into this whole argumentation. I'd say that we have the task today to redefine what America is, both from the past, because America was never white Anglo-Saxon settler society. It was only so by removing indigenous population, not counting them. It was by removing the Black community that was there and removing them. It was also removing the Chinese American with the Chinese Exclusionary Act before that and after it. So it was a constant attempt from the same time until today of how to define America according to the people who are there on an equal footing. So all of us are citizens on probation. We have to prove that we qualify to be citizens, while our counterpart, the whiteness of America, their citizenship is never questioned. And I think what we need is to open that conversation of defining who's an American, what is an America, and how to make it more inclusive and representative of all those who built it from the ground up. And that, for me, is what is facing us as the big question in the current period.
Thank you, Professor. ¿Y qué más? And what more? Panelists, don't make me have to pick on you. This is like algebra class.
Okay, so I'll say something. I loved, Polo, what you said about extraction, because in some ways I believe that COVID-19 is the universe telling us about extraction and about if you humans cannot do better, we will bring this to you. And that's kind of my spiritual belief about COVID and what is happening in this world, that we cannot extract and extract and extract, because pretty soon we extract our souls and there's nothing there. And so to bring back who we are, to bring back the love and the dignity and the it's a huge journey, but I guess it starts with each one of us. But to me, the world, the planet, the universe is shedding tears and speaking to us right now and saying, what will you do? Who will you be in response?
I will also add to your question there, Polo. I agree with what has been said, of course, already, but specifically your point about stripping and extracting resources from the world, from Mother Earth. I fully agree. And obviously, we're seeing that happening both here and abroad with the continued sort of imperialism that we have. A lot of people don't know that one of the reasons that Western countries are very interested in Afghanistan is that it sits on $1 trillion of mineral wealth that we are desperate to exploit and use. And there's a natural gas pipeline as well. And this also goes to talking about the specific resources that other places have. Of course, we have Iraq with oil. We have Asian and African countries who have been sort of stripped as well of resources. We've had the theft of resources and then genocide of our Native American siblings, the bodies and labor of our siblings stolen from Africa, who were brought here as slaves, up to a third of which were Muslim, by the way. So we see a lot of this kind of stripping that's happening, and it is eating away at our human soul, as Peggy was saying. Like, I agree with that. That is having an impact on all of us, and we really have to understand that this race for resources by the most wealthy, whether they're nations or individuals, is leaving the world in suffering and pain in significant ways that's only going to grow unless we really organize and mobilize and put a stop to this kind of behavior that continues to rape the land and the people of their resources.
For me, as a Yemeni American looking at Yemen today, I feel sorry for my beloved country, the country that I love, and I grew up in the best time of Yemen. I see my brothers and sisters in Yemen today are suffering by our own hands. I care less, the politics, of the proxy wars of, Russia and America. I care more about my people and the indulging in the wars inside Yemen. So it is very important that I want to shed the lights, the lights that will be able me to heal and unify, it will be able me to understand that the diversity of our people, it is the strength of our people. Today I cry for what is happening inside Palestine, and many of us here in America, in the Asian community, in the African community, and many others are remaining silent, because they're afraid to be labeled anti-Semitic. I love my Jewish brothers. I respect my Jewish sisters and brothers, because many societies embraced our fellow brothers and sisters of Jewish and Christian background. The golden age of Islam, as Dr. David Westerstein said, if it wasn't Islam, Judaism wouldn't have survived Christian Europe. Muslims were in the forefront, to defend the Jewish people from bigotry of Christian Europe. So it is very important for me to heal with my Jewish brothers, to understand them that we are not enemies of each other, but we are obliged and morally and ethically, morally, to condemn, terrorism that happened by states. Our taxpayers today is involved in many places of destruction of this universe. So it is very important for me, to find that white supremacy in me, and address it and acknowledge it so I can move. My beloved great Arab American poet, he said, we need to find the spaces in togetherness. We were born together, and together we shall be forever. Together we shall be together when the white wings of death scatter our days. This is the poem that, this great Arab American poet, Khalil Gibran said. And he said, give your hearts, but not into each other's keeping. For only the hand of life can contain your hearts, and stand together, yet not to be near together. For the pillars of the temple stand apart, and the oak tree and the cypress grow not into each other's shadow. We don't need to grow in each other's shadow, but we need to love one another and accept one another and condemn without any fear, with the courageous voice, with the loving voice, when bigotry happen within our communities, whether that's Yemen, whether it is Afghanistan or any other places. And so do we as Asian Americans. We need to understand that we have a responsibility, that we condemn bigotry and hate wherever it happened, so we can heal and unify.
Oh, mashallah, Sabdara Wajdi. We have about 4 minutes left, and I want to make sure Dr. Lowe blesses us as we leave. I'm just so moved by this humbleness, this sincerity, the graciousness she brings us. So let's hear from her when we finish, but others, please, if you would like to speak now, we have about 4 minutes left.
So give
Please
other
wave
people a
arms.
chance to talk. So in
Yes.
my mind, when we talk about extraction, undoing nature, it's all because of industrialization that came about 200 some years ago. Because of industrialization, we need a lot of raw resources. We need to overproduce what we need. and we waste, and we are not serving nature and keeping nature balanced. We can, with our wisdom, can develop a society with manage our resources, and be able to move forward, bringing nature back to its own original form, still enjoying it, loving it, the way we people have learned to live in it many, many millions years, or hundreds of thousands of years, since civilization has come to this earth. So I really would like to see that we put our intelligence and our effort not just to go over what has hurt us, but also find solutions to move forward, to be able to see this world more positively, and more, that we can do something about it, because the power is in our own hands.
Power is in our hands. I feel better already. Three sisters who haven't spoken yet, here's your chance.
Say that we all have a social and moral obligation to play a role within our own homes, within our own communities, as to how we treat the environment. And if we could be role models for our children and our families and our communities, that is a start. And education is key. So many have said so many amazing things here, that we just need to make sure that a conversation on climate change, on the environment, continues to be ongoing.
I think when you're doing advocacy work, it doesn't just limit to civil rights or advocacy for our own communities. Advocacy involves not only racial justice but environmental justice as well too, right? When it comes to disparities in general that we face in our own communities around the world, we know that there's a huge discrepancy or differences when it comes to different races, right? So the impact of COVID-19 has been much greater in communities of color in Africa, Asia, and South America. So one of the positive part of COVID-19 to me is this opportunity for all of us to understand that when things happen, that it's not limited to one part of the world, that it's engaging and involving all of us and all of our countries and community members. And we feel pain when others lose their families and people are suffering, because we see it in our own families and neighbors as well too. It is very unfortunate that this is what it took for us to really understand that we live in a global world, and that things that are happening is not limited to one corner of the world anymore, right? And understanding that we have to look out for one another so we can all be better together. I think COVID-19 has taught us that, right? We all have to be vaccinated. We have to wear masks. We do it not only for ourselves, but for our community. And, for those of us who have access to vaccines because we are wealthier and can afford it or have technology to do so, I think we have the duties to share that with others. And same thing with technologies for clean energy, clean water, opportunities for education. I think all those things, it seems like it's a lot, but I think it is in all of our ability to help those in need. We just need to set our sight a little wider. So.
Thank you, Sister Jenny. Sister Anila, you get to have the last word or several last words on this. Sila ka.
I already answered, Polo.
Oh. Oh dear, can you do it again? Because what happened, only you were cut off by Tuan Wajdi speaking.
Got it.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay.
So probably you heard yourself, but I'm not sure many of us, or maybe we split the screen and some of us heard the grumpy guapo and some of us heard you.
Got it. I just pointed out that there is a lot of resources being extracted and has led to horrible foreign policy decisions that really impact us all. So it is critical for us to step up and also recognize that we here in the US, we have a special privilege and opportunity because we actually can control some of the decisions that are made with respect to our foreign policy. And that's what's really important for us to really exercise is our power to be able to influence what's going on in the world. For me, I see it as sometimes I have survivor's guilt for being here when so many others are not, who are currently my own family that's trying to escape Afghanistan, where they're facing danger because of the foreign policy decisions of our country in Afghanistan. So I recognize the blessing that I have and the opportunity and responsibility that I have. But I would say every single one of us has that kind of opportunity. And when we're talking specifically about environmental justice and climate change, and I agree that it's directly connected with racial justice, you cannot be an advocate for one without the other because these issues are directly interconnected with each other. But one of the things I will point out is beyond the responsibility we have to influence policy in our country, we also have personal responsibility. And one of the ways that each one of us every single day can exercise that personal responsibility is with what we choose to put in our mouth. That alone, our food choices have a huge impact on the environment. And that's possibly one of the greatest ways that each one of us individually can impact climate change in our country and in the world. So that's an additional one that I will point out. I know we're out of time, so I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Sister. Folks, we have to wrap this up. Terima kasih banyak. I offer you our love. And this goes to our participating audience as well. This group, this panel, has given us so much information and has moved us so much. And moreover, you've made us and you've made us weep. Some of you made us weep. You know who you are. So, audience, participants, please know that the addresses, the contact information for this panel should be in your conference materials, and that these folks welcome argument, welcome working together, welcome playing together, welcome together. And I guess in the end, that's about the very best we can do, is laugh and cry together, sorrow and joy together. So I thank you all so much. I thank the organizing principals, the parties, Dr. Lowe. I will just thank you directly because your face is here, for giving us this forum, this place, this time to laugh and cry, to learn and to be moved together.